All right, everyone. I show 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific on my clock. So that means it is time to get started. And I'm so excited that we are finishing this day with one of the thought leaders, one of the groundbreakers in the women's hockey space. It is my pleasure to introduce to you all, who you've heard name dropped many, many times, Alyssa Longmuir, who has been a key contributor to the women's hockey analytics scene for over 5 years. She's had research and articles published at The Athletic, 538, Hockey Graphs, The Ice Garden, and also independently on her own. She's a primary school STEM teacher by day and has earned a graduate certificate in sports analytics from the University of Canberra and a Master's of Education in STEM from Western Sydney University, in which she focused on the use of sport to engage students in data and statistics. Alyssa is one of the main organizers of the Women's Hockey Hack and also organized ISIL Hack in 2020. A founding member of evenstrength.com in 2018, which was widely regarded as the first site of its kind for women's hockey analytics by her peers. She is also the co-host of the Net Growth podcast, a podcast which is dedicated to women's hockey analytics and data. Alyssa is also the primary analyst for the Australian Women's Hockey League and has previously worked with the Newcastle North Star in the Australian Men's League as a statistician and analyst. It is my great pleasure to turn the stage over to the queen. Alyssa, take it away, my dear.
I like the bit that was missed there, which was Alyssa also needs a nap, if that could possibly be arranged. I wouldn't mind it at all. But yeah, hi everyone. I am going to be talking about power plays a bunch today. Obviously, we got the Big Data Cup data drop yesterday. And so I've already watched all 180 minutes of Olympic power plays, so you don't have to. As we go over some of the bits and pieces that have happened throughout the Olympics, and then how that's going to relate to the new data we have access to. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to throw it in the Q&A. I will try not to lose them, but also before I get started, I don't know if it was an accident or not, but just in case any of them are still here, I had a question for the panelists of the last panel where I was just asking them specifically in regards to Carly's talk earlier, which was great. If you didn't watch it, you should go back and watch it. But what as like writers, GMs have made them really excited in the past year from like a data and analytics standpoint? And is there anything they'd like to see in the future? So if you are still here, please message me on Twitter. I would love to know your answer. Yeah, I think something just happened with my question and it went missing into the answered pile without actually being answered. But anyway, on with the show. So the woman advantage or power plays at the Olympics. Funny story is I started tracking the player locations manually by myself and then gave up about 2 minutes of footage into having to deal with Canada's jerseys. And I'm so glad I did, because I would be crying right now if I didn't. Anyway, I know Alison already read an incredibly long introduction for me, but yeah, local primary school STEM teacher. I also stream data science. So if you're interested in seeing someone work through the Big Data Cup data really in depth at both a super low beginner level and also at like trying computer vision, machine learning level, come find me on Twitch. That's pretty much what my next month's going to look like. And while I am not in possession of a fancy title, Andrew Thomas did tell me I could write Pioneer. And I trust him. So I did that. Anyway, I asked my Twitch chat about a week or two ago, what makes a good power play in their eyes? And there was some really big consensus points across everyone who answered. We really like a clean entry or a face-off win. We're a big fan of a crisp cross-ice pass, and I mean specifically crisp, like the word crisp was in like 4 different tweets. We like a decentralized or the decentralization of a defensive formation, so kind of jostling them around, making them panic a bit. We like to move the goalie. Again, we want them to be yo-yoing between post to post, not knowing where the puck's going to come from. And we generally like a shot attempt to occur within 10 seconds. So that's what the internet thinks a good power play is. But what do teams now think a good power play is? So the meta. I'm going to steal this term from esports. Some people say it stands for most effective tactics available. But I honestly just think it's really what teams are currently doing that influence the way the game is played. Obviously when we're talking esports, we see that change with patch updates, with new players being introduced, with new maps. Any of those things can, alter the way pro teams select which, characters they use, select the way they attack certain problems. And in hockey, we can use it to talk to how teams approach special teams. So there's a couple of key things we kind of see teams widely accepting at this point in time. One of those is the 4 forward, 1 defender structure. This was, when I looked it up on Meta Hockey, seemed to largely be Matt Cain doing writing about it. He's now at the New Jersey Devils, but some really great work on that if you want to learn more about it. The other one is the 1-3-1 structure. I couldn't find any definitive location that this kind of started from, whether an analytics standpoint or hello, computer, you're holding together, good, or a coaching standpoint. But it was something that is pretty much uniformly used across all of men's, women's, pro, semi-pro, and international ice hockey as the predominant power play structure. Next up is specific positioning. Obviously, this plays in to that power play structure, but it's also about, do you have a player at the point? Do you have a player in front of the crease? What about your other 3 players? Are they roaming, or are they positioned in specific locations? Is anyone at a face-off dot? There was I'd say the start of a trend that didn't really catch hold a couple of years ago, which Ryan Stimson was a big fan of. Wrote a book. It's great. I recommend reading it. It has a bunch about this in it, which was having a player below the blue line on the power play. And we, to a level, definitely see that used more now than it was prior to kind of that stuff coming out. But I wouldn't say it was something that had been 100% adopted by teams. And then we do see teams trying to do a 3 to 4 pass setup as they lead into a shot on goal. So the counting stats, what did the power plays look like at the Olympics from the most basic level? What I can tell you is that Canada popped off. I think anyone who watched the Olympics can tell you that Canada popped off, but their power play numbers were actually insane. At one point, I'm pretty sure they were as high as 49%. They dominated in that sphere. They had a really good set play on the power play, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But yeah, that set play and those formations and the speed at which they could get shots was a real advantage for them. On the flip side of the coin, as already discussed today, the power play was something that Team USA really struggled on. Again, it was as low as I think it was 18% heading into the knockout rounds. They managed to claw it back a little bit, but for a while there, it was you know what? They might actually be better to, opt out. We would not like this power play. Thank you. Please take it back. And was something they really struggled at, only getting 7 power play goals despite, almost 50 minutes on the power play. Meanwhile, Canada's trying to win a whole game on a power play, It was a big difference and a difference maker, I would say, in regards to how both teams approach the tournaments and approach setbacks in the tournament, which again, we will touch on slightly later in this presentation. Play-by-play overview. I managed to obtain, which means I really nicely asked Megan if I could have it, and Megan very nicely gave it to me, an early play-by-play data sample of what is part of the Big Data Cup data set. And this is just based on 4 total games, so each team playing 2 games here, and kind of the overview of what this looked like for them. So, we can see that Canada's already generating quite a number of shots, lots of face-offs, less plays than everyone else. But the big thing I noticed when I was kind of looking at this data for the first time was that it wasn't contextualized great because, we know Canada spent significantly less time on the power play than anyone else. So what does it look like when we account for that as well? this is where we get this. So this is power play stats by power play minute. And this is where you can really start to see how strong and how fast Canada's power play was. You know, they have almost, 3.7 face-off wins. The next closest is 1 per minute. There's zone entry to 3.4. They're generating 4.9 shots per minute on the power play with 26 plays happening in that time. If they lose a puck, they were resetting instantly and going at it again. There was absolutely nothing slow about this power play. It was an incredibly well-oiled machine. Everyone knew where they were supposed to be, what they were supposed to be doing, and how they were going to achieve. And we really saw that reflected in the simple counting stats. But what happens can my computer stop glitching out? Hold it together, bud. But what happens in regards to play types? So I got the play-by-play and I segmented it into play segments. So anytime a puck was retrieved until that puck was lost or that puck was shot. So here we can see of the total sample of all these segments, there were 685 incomplete plays occurred. Block shots, there were 301, missed 101, and on net, there were 351. The number in the middle that you're seeing that is big is the average number of passes for that result by play sequence. So what we are seeing is kind of that back off of what we talked about in the meta, that 3 to 4 shot range, 3 or 4 pass range prior to a shot really being the sweet spot with, as we can see, on net pucks on average having 3.54 shots beforehand. Incompletes and blocks are around the same time, but I find it really interesting that missed shots almost looked like they are simply overworked shots. Like they missed the on-net opportunity they were going for. Maybe a pass didn't connect, someone wasn't quite in the right spot, someone, got in the way. And so they've just kind of flung it in the direction vaguely of the net. And it hasn't made it there, but they've tried, is what, just based on watching, a decent amount of video and then looking at the data, is largely my hypothesis for why missed shots on average are a longer pass play sequence. Again, by team, we can break this down further and look at how within a team's 100% of sequences, where are they more strongly, trending in terms of what's happening. So what we can see is Canada, most of their power play sequences, and by most, I mean, 25% ended in a shot on net. That means if Canada is doing a play, there was a 1 in 4 chance that was going to end up with the goalie having to do something. That's actually kind of insane when you think about it for too long. Finland really struggled. While they had lots of shots on net. Wait, the math is wrong. Is the math wrong? Oh, it's still right, but the coloring might be wrong. It's fine, folks. This is why you don't make graphs pretty at like a ridiculous hour. But anyway, Finland really struggled with missed shots and missed a lot of them, where at the same time we can see that the USA and Sweden, we're getting more incompletes or blocks. USA in particular, the lowest percentage of on net play, even though, everything's a little funky there and it shouldn't be. We love finding mistakes. I'll fix it later on stream if you want to find out what the actual numbers are. The next thing I wanted to look at was passes removed, and specifically what those passes removed looked like, to see if we could easily kind of discern any system or, glean any real insight into what teams were doing with the pucks beforehand. Now, please remember that this was based on just the play-by-play data. And now that we have tracking data, I am we're already ready to make these charts significantly fancier than they are, because we can now see things like player movement in between these passes, which will be immensely beneficial. And again, I will touch on later. But yeah, for Canada, what I really noticed was the existence of structure. Even, one shot removed, one pass removed, 2, 3, 4 passes removed from the shot on goal. You can see that they have an idea of what they're doing. And it's a consistent idea throughout both their power play 1 and their power play 2 units, which is really interesting. In comparison, other teams like Finland and the USA are definitely a little bit more everywhere. And in the case of Switzerland, we can say that they show a real preference for the right side of the ice in regards to that 2 and 3 passes out from a goal. A lot of this comes down to player positioning. Canada also kind of favoring one side of the ice to a certain degree. It was the side of the ice that MPP was on. In the case of Switzerland, we're talking Alina Muller and Lara Stelder largely on that side of the ice. And you can see it reflected in, where these passing routes are going and who's really engaging in the lead-up play to shooting the puck. If we want to talk specifically about pre-pass movement, it gets, still better with tracking data, but even with play-by-play, it's feasible to do. So here we can see arrows representing specific players' passes, followed by the dotted lines being an estimated movement between those 2 locations. And what we can see here is that Canada did have a very set kind of funnel the puck around and bring it in the right-hand side. And this was a set play that we saw them use over and over again during the tournament. That numerous goals were scored on, which largely involved Sarah Fillier passing to Marie-Philippe Poulin, who passed to Brianne Jenner, who shot the puck. And this was something, again, it was repeated over and over and over again to the point that Sammy Jo Small, who I had kind of the blessing of having as one of my commentators for the Australian broadcast, because we get the international broadcast, was pointing out every time it happened, and the entire time just watching the Olympics, and she'd be like, there's that set play again. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it is that set play. And they were so good at it that there was nothing teams could do to stop them. Unfortunately, in the 2-game sample I had for Team Canada, it did not have any of the games where they scored on that set play, but you can already see the beginnings of it taking shape. The other thing I really wanted to note for Canada is the fact that particularly their power play 2 unit still did phenomenally well, even losing Melody Daewoo, who was either going to be on that unit or on the number 1 unit. We don't really know because she only played 1 power play before she was injured. This is going to come up when we talk in comparison to Team USA and how they adapted to losing Brianne Jenner, who was obviously a massive part of their power play. Here's Team USA's. So you might have noticed on the previous slide, I had the players that were in Team Canada's main number 1 power play unit listed to the side. Team USA, I don't know, roll a dice, yell out some numbers, and they're going on the ice. They really lacked an identity when I looked at the data, was my main kind of, I guess, takeaway from the entire situation. I didn't know who they were, and I still don't know who they are looking at this. Like, there are 12 different players estimated to be on power play 1. I kept picking different players to kind of try and pull in their sequences, and all of them are apparently on power play 1. You can also see that as against Canada, when we looked at both the passes removed and that pre-shot movement, that kind of defined flow that existed that you could really see, she's not there. And I don't want to be the person to keep harping on about how bad this power play was for the rest of time, largely because I'm terrified that eventually Joel Johnson is going to find out that I've been slandering his name all over the internet, and I don't know what he's going to do, ban me from Team USA matches. There's an ocean in the way, but I still would prefer the Team USA coach did not know that I have been publicly slandering him all over the internet because his power play was garbage. I still don't understand it. And I hope maybe the big data, cup data will help me understand it. But the more I look at the Team USA power play, the more confused I am. I have rewatched all the tape. I have looked at all the data I had available, and I am still absolutely oblivious to what their tactic was. or even what formation they were trying to run. It's confusing, and confusing can be good, but you can see the difference between the two power plays now. It exists. Oh, is it going to go to the next page? Here we go. So what next? What do I want next from the project? Well, I want to integrate the Big Data Cup tracking data, dive more into the positioning of specific players and also player impact zones, taking into account, the penalty kill players and what space are they taking up on the ice and how is that impacting on opposing players. I also really want to pair it with video and animation. I almost did it for this presentation, but then I ran out of time to hand draw video because the IOC scares me. And I am not putting GIFs anywhere on the internet, even if it's just in a Zoom call. So what does this kind of mean for you? Now you kind of have an overview of what power plays were at the Olympics and kind of how they maybe work. What are some things we can be asking ourselves? Well, for starters, the use of space in regards to special teams. How are teams using space? How are they making space for players? What players are in charge of creating space and what players go into spaces that have been created? I think the idea specifically of players that make space in women's hockey is super interesting, because when we talk about players making space in men's hockey, we're largely talking about checking, whether that be open ice or full body or, whatever. But it's obviously, not quite as allowed in women's hockey. So how are teams making space? Are they still using physical play? Are they using speed? Are they using tactics? That's some really interesting stuff that someone could look into. Common play paths and their effectiveness. I feel like this is kind of the almost lowball one, because we see it all the time. Any single time there is tracking data of any type released, 1 million of people come out with a presentation or a paper about play paths and their effectiveness. It's me. I'm people. I want to look at play paths and effectiveness. And so honestly, there's no shame in that. And it's really interesting to see how different people approach it. So again, I think it's a really interesting angle that you can take. The other one that I'm really interested in is player positioning trends and habits. Kind of ties in with the making space, but which players are going where on the ice? Which areas are they trying to stay to? We talked about that specific positioning back in the meta and, the point player, the person who's kind of in front of the slot in those dirty areas, I guess, umbrella players, bumper players, where are players playing and how effective are they at playing those areas are all really interesting things that we can dig into. And I really look forward to seeing the results of as we start to see Big Data Cup papers submitted and people tweeting progress stuff and, hopefully more people streaming it. If you want to stream coding it, literally let me know. I will hype you up in chat. But yeah, kind of from here, where to find me, because from here forth, there's a whole bunch of stuff over the next, month or so as everyone really dives in to the Big Data Cup data, and I would love to be as much help as I can. So I'm Alyssa's tweeting on Twitter. I'm AK Longmuir pretty much everywhere else. Twitch, as I said, we're going to be doing beginner friendly level streams, really looking at simply how do you even consider working with the Big Data Cup data, but we're also going to be doing stupid stuff like looking at insane machine learning image recognition stuff that I wanted to do last year, but simply couldn't because my computer couldn't handle it. So I built a new one. But yeah, that's pretty much my take on power plays as of this very minute. I really hope that inspired some questions in you and inspired you to kind of break out the data and see kind of what I've already done with it and look at different ways to look at that yourselves. And then also really look at the tracking data and how we can utilize that. because this is really exciting. It's a great data set, and it's kind of awesome that women's hockey is the first hockey to have publicly available tracking data that we can work with. So men's hockey people, I will be bullying you in the coming weeks. You know, it's going to happen. I'm sorry. But yeah, thanks to Megan Shaker, who so lovingly gave me the data just a tiny bit early so I could use some of it. Mike and Carly for constantly hyping me up in the group DMs. And also just everyone who's in any of the women's hockey Discord or Slack groups. Honestly, every single one of those people is fantastic. I'm so happy I've got to the point where I can't actually have a slide with everyone on it because it's too many people now. Weird life goals, but we made it. But yeah, we'll be talking more about this on Net Growth. I'll be talking about it on Twitch. And, you know, those of us at Women's Hockey Hack, I know obviously there's going to be a big presentation thing for Big Data Cup, I assume in some degree, but we are more than happy and would love anyone who really gets into this and really enjoy this to either present Big Data Cup stuff or unrelated women's hockey stuff at our Women's Hockey Hack in July. So yes. Have we got questions? I should check that.
We do, Alyssa. Outstanding presentation. Thank you so much. Let me read to you. We've got a couple here.
I had them up on my other screen. The text is a tiny bit small and I just can't read it without very obviously reading them.
You are busy. It is fine. That's what I'm here for. Here's the first question for you from Dante. His question is, I'm curious if you've noticed any difference in strategy depending on the point in the game, which players were off the ice, or if the US was any better in 5 versus 3 situations. Or did they just try to use their same quote unquote strategy across all these sorts of scenarios?
So yeah, when I was looking at this data, I actually broke it down specifically to 5-on-4s because there really wasn't a lot of 5-on-3 situations at all. And the plays were kind of broken and it just wasn't working. But I did look at it before I decided to pull it out. And yes, I would say the strategy was exactly the same. I don't know what's happening still. I hate that I'm so baffled by this power play, even after dumping all this time into it, but I am still so baffled by this power play.
I think you're not alone. I think we know that much. Here's a question from our favorite, Mike Murphy. His question is, 7 different players on Team Canada had a primary assist on the power play. Do you think that this illustrates the success of their set plays and the efficacy of the second unit? What can a team do to counter a power play that deep and dangerous?
Yeah, it was kind of insane. Like they had that main set play that they just ran over and over and over and over and over again. But different people would sub in. Like everyone knew the play. So if someone else was where Sarah Fillier was usually standing, they just became Sarah Fillier for a second and did her job kind of thing. And I think that's in a lot of ways the importance of every player on a team knowing the system, because if every player on the team knows the system and knows everyone's role, specifically in regards to special teams, then if you do have something like what happened with Team USA where Brianna Decker gets injured, you don't have that panic where it's like, oh, well, who's going to fill her role? It's like Canada went into special teams like a very well-rehearsed musical with really good alternates and a bunch of swings that knew all the tracks. Whereas Team USA might have been a high school production. I don't know if they had alternates or swings because I don't think anyone knew what was happening. But yeah, we really did see with Canada, everyone knowing the play and everyone knowing the plays that they were going for really helped them. And people were able to seamlessly slip in and out of roles as necessary. In terms of what can teams do to counter a power play that dangerous, I think it's one of those things, and it's something that's been, I guess, debated in hockey and specifically men's hockey for a long time. I think when I think power play dominance, and particularly like known power play dominance, like it's a play, everyone knows the play. I think Washington Capitals on the power play. Everyone knows that play. I know that play and I barely watch men's hockey, but like you can't stop it. like, what are you going to do against that? I think it's knowing the play and trying to stop it early. And if you can stop it early, you've got a better chance, because if you're realizing halfway through the play, oh my gosh, this play is happening, it's too late. The play's already happening. Like, what are you going to do? So yeah, I think knowing the play as the opponent, and then also knowing how to intercept it earlier is really the key to kind of breaking up these set plays. Because, you know, if you're letting it get too close to the net, if the puck is at MPP and you know she's going to pass to Rebecca Johnston, it's already too late, because what are you going to do? Stop her from, like, you know, all 5-stack over, like, swarm Rebecca Johnston? Great. Now MPP has a free shot on net. Like, it's a lose-lose once it gets to that final pass.
Incredible points. I love that. I love those lessons that are across all levels of hockey as well. One more question for you right now, Alyssa, and this is from Jordan. The question is, what basic ways or tactics can community competition level coaching staffs start to track these types of stats for the power play?
Oh, this is like all my hobbies. Welcome. You found most of my origin story. So my first thing I ever manually tracked, because I was very much like the women's hockey manual tracking person for a good long period of time. I'm glad that we kind of have better data accessibility now, and occasionally people give me data instead of I'm having to manually acquire it myself. But when I did my graduate certificate, I did it specifically on power plays and specifically on power play movement. And I think it's kind of building up. So at first it was just tracking where the shot came from on the power play. And then it was trying to identify where the shot came from and where the pass that fed that shot came from on the power play. Because, you know, I feel like if you start and you just draw a dot for every single pass or like a line, you're just going to end up with squiggles all over your page and you're not going to know how to read it. But if you build backwards in terms of its tracking is very much almost like a muscle. Like when I haven't tracked in ages and I try to track again, I am so slow and I'm so bad at it. But if I've been doing it for ages and I'm really in the swing of things, like the season I spent with the Newcastle North Stars, I was tracking shot locations. I was manually tracking Corsi by hand in a notebook, which is insane, and no one should ever do that. And I was tracking, to the best of my ability, shot assists as well. And it is really a build-up. I started with shots, and then I worked out how I was going to do Corsi, and then I worked out how I was going to do shot assists. And you just kind of build up stamina, and your brain learns to concentrate on a bunch of things at once. But I would start with shot locations, and then I would move backwards. Or if you notice something that you think is a set play, draw it, and then watch the next time those players are on the ice and see if they execute the same strategy. Because you can sit there and go, I think that's the same strategy, but it's going to be way easier to know that's the same strategy if you've actually, you know, made concrete evidence of that strategy existing for yourself, rather than, I guess, just kind of being like, yeah, I think that looked the same. Because I think a lot of things look the same. And then I look at what I've written and I'm like, you're blind. This is why you have glasses, you fool.
That is outstanding. And Alyssa, I know you've written about your work and approach to tracking in the past. Are those pieces still up, or maybe you can just tell people
yeah,
where
that
to
one's
look?
on the Ice Garden. So
Great.
I think you can just search my name in Ice Garden. There's an entire one about me tracking the entire season of Australian women's ice hockey data. So
yeah, and I can't recommend it enough. It's impressive, but also so accessible. So it's a really great piece for people who might be wanting to look in more in-depth for examples, or maybe a hand to hold as they start their tracking journey.
And like, there's so many great resources there now. Like Arn has a fantastic shot plotter, which was built off my janky shot plotter. So glad someone made a nice version of that, but it's fantastic. Like, this does not have to be a pen and paper situation anymore. And I could not be happier that we have moved past that stage just as a community, because the pen and paper stage was rough.
Hey, I still have some of your 212 trackers, my friend.
I still have a few of those because I cannot bring an entire laptop to a hockey game with me. But, you know, when I can, it's nice to use the computer.
Well, Alyssa, thank you so much. This was exceptional as always. We've come to expect that from you every single time, and continue to follow Alyssa and look at her resources. I mean, this is, again, cream of the crop stuff that we're finding, not just for women's hockey, but hockey analysis as a whole. So thank you, Alyssa, so much. I don't think there's any more questions from our audience. So this brings our time together to a close. On behalf of my fellow organizers, who I do believe are going to join me shortly, I want to again extend a tremendous thank you to everyone who presented, everyone who made time to share their knowledge and their insights. I want to thank everyone who attended, and thank you for your attention, and thank you for letting us know what you wanted to hear more about and getting those questions in and sharing what we're doing on social media as well. And of course, a special thank you to all of our sponsors, and particularly the people who have been behind the scenes helping all of this technology work, both from Simon Fraser University and St. Lawrence. It takes a village. And I'm now going to be quiet and turn it over to two of the three people who really make this event happen. Megan is not with us, but Shirley and Michael, it's been such a pleasure to do this again with you this year. I'll give the floor to you.
Shirley, go ahead. You can start.
Thanks so much. This has been fun. I hope everybody who's been attending has enjoyed it as much as I have sitting back here behind the scenes. I really wanted to express a deep appreciation to the presenters today. Thank you so much for sharing that expertise, and to the attendees for your participation, but also for your good questions. You make this conference what it is. We hope that you will join us again next year. 2023, that'll be our 8th version. And before that, you still have the Big Data Cup, which will have our finals in June of this year. So we hope to see you again at the Big Data Cup. I put in the chat a thanks to all our sponsors. Just Allison's mentioned them again, but I just wanted to put it in the chat. Thank them so much. Michael, over to you.
And I will just add big thanks to Allison and Megan and Shirley. You know, a lot of work goes into this, and they are just a joy to work with. And so hopefully next year we can be back at Carleton in person. That would be tremendous. Though I think the virtual is probably going to be with us in some form, and I think there are some great advantages there. But again, my thanks to everybody who was involved, the presenters, and the folks behind the scenes. It was a wonderful couple days, and go out there and start playing with that Big Data Cup data, and keep following on social media about updates on aspects of that and other information there. That's all I've got. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.